Hi, I'm Roger Fulton. I am an outdoor author. I've been a writer now for 35 years, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the publishing industry and with a focus on what's going on today with the self-publishing options. My first book came out in 1988. It was called Common Sense Supervision. Why did I think that the world needed my little book of Common Sense Supervision? And that's kind of the first rule, is you have to write what somebody else wants to read. And Common Sense Supervision was born from when I became a supervisor and I didn't have any training. And it's like if you're a bank teller one day and you're very good at it, the next they call you in and they say, the next day you're in charge of all the bank tellers. You're the head teller and you have no experience in supervision. So that was the necessity that I saw to write the book Common Sense Supervision. How long did it take me? I always joke and say a lifetime, but it actually, from the time that I started writing and got the manuscript together, it took 2.5 years to get it into publication. You had to write query letters to identify the publishers who might want it, and then you had to wait for their answers, and then you had to send them a manuscript, and it went on and on and on, but 2.5 years. My most recent book, Nature Adventures in Central Florida. Of course, by this time I knew the industry, I knew what needed to be put together for a manuscript, and my assistant and I got together on I said, we're going to get this, go through the technology, and we're going to get the publishing done on this book. I don't care how long it takes. It took 2.5 hours. So I went from 2.5 years to 2.5 hours, and that's how far the technology has come. And you can do the same thing. It's not an easy journey. You will have to work at it. Did I just all of a sudden one day say, oh, I think I'll publish by myself? And the answer is no. I had hours and hours of research in what the best options were. And you can do the same thing online. Actually, just before I started this interview, I looked online, and back in 1988, I read a book called How to Get Happily Published. And it talked all about the entire process of getting published back then. I just checked, and the latest version seems to be 1999, but it includes the self-publishing options back then. The point of this whole thing is that you need to understand the entire industry. It's not just about writing. It's about understanding how to get published, what people want in a publication, and then you get into the technology end of it, which, everything from cover design through getting paid. Next option is, why do you want to even get published? And what will it do for you? Well, first of all, you want to get the word out on something that you know that nobody else knows. And you want to say, hi, you need to know this. Right? So that's one reason. But you also it's very prestigious to have a published book. I was 40 years old when I published my first book, and people came to me and said, wow, you're a published author at only 40 years old? And of course nowadays things have changed, but it was impressive back then. And to give you an idea, with a publisher, my first volume that they published was a run of 11,500 copies. Okay? Today, in most industries, they just press a button and a book comes out the other end of the machine. So it's gotten that simple. You don't have any inventory, so it's really gotten to be much better. The other thing you may want to get paid. They call it royalties, and I have been getting a check every 6 months from Common Sense Supervision, publisher of Common Sense Supervision, for 31 years. Now the checks aren't all that big anymore, especially since Amazon started selling used books, but my book is still available. But then how did I arrange that it would be in print for 31 years? And when I read How to Get Happily Published, they said go with a big publisher, it won't be in print very long. Go with a small publisher, and they'll keep it in print. Little tricks like that are what you need to know. So with that, I can only say that my last book, the Nature Adventures book, I published online, again with my assistant, in 2.5 hours, and I got it on Kindle and also in paperback using Kindle Direct Publishing, also known in the industry as KDP. I had several options in and outside of the United States. There's a couple of outfits in England that are pretty good. So, but again, you got to do your research and work hard at it. And that's the way you can be a successful author. Now, I understand that some people have some questions about this, and I'll be happy to answer them. We designed a cover, but when we got into the technology end of it, my assistant had a great deal of difficulty working through their system. And it gets kind of confusing. We actually did the manuscript in a PDF format, expecting that would be what they want. No, they wanted it in a Word format. But then they wanted the cover and a couple of other things in the PDF format. So we had tried to work our way through that, and we spent probably 45 minutes to an hour trying to work our way through it. And finally we decided to go with their template. But my cover I still wanted in the book, so we just made that page 1 of the book. So it was their cover design, and we got to choose the color and the font, that sort of thing. But it was still their template. I take hundreds of photographs. I'm not a photographer, I take pictures. But you know, we needed something to dress it up, and I always like to provide a picture so that the people can get to the same location and see the same thing that I saw in my work. And so I take the photos, and they come out in a JPEG format, and there's a way to insert JPEGs right into your text in Word, and that's exactly what we did. To address what the benefits are of getting published, first of all, people are amazed that you could get that published, and then you've got something to say. Some people want to do their memoirs, and in fact my autobiography will be out fairly soon. And I leave it not just for posterity, but for people to learn the lessons that I had to learn and make it a little easier for them. Plus, you know, I'm going to have some descendants, and maybe 2,000 years from now, somebody will look up the antique and find out how people lived in my era. A buddy of mine, he is retired from the Vermont State Police, and he wrote the history of the Vermont State Police. And when he went for a job later as a college professor, that was the deciding factor. He was a published author and had written the history of the Vermont State Police. And that's kind of what put him over the edge to get the job. And then the other thing is the royalty situation. Anybody who wants to be a full-time writer, I strongly suggest that you have a rich uncle set up a trust fund for you beforehand. You know, there are people who do make a living writing, but most of them work for newspapers or whatever. Freelancers like me, I do fine, but and still you're getting paid. Now, nowadays I write nature books. I'm going to be out in nature anyhow, so my royalties just kind of subsidize my next work. At every stage of getting a book into print, somebody is willing to take your money. Whether it's cover design, or in this case, editing your work. You should be your primary editor. And of course you have to have a good grasp of the English language and be able to communicate with your audience. But everybody also needs an editor. In my case, I have my co-author at some point became my editor. So I do pretty well with it, but then he gets it and goes over it, and of course my assistant goes over it. But I can guarantee you that no matter how much you edit, it will never be perfect, or you'll never think it's perfect. And I have never written anything, despite several people going over it, that didn't have a typo in it, especially with automatic word correct. So you can pay an editor hundreds of dollars, or I would say get some friends to read it, somebody that you know can read and write, and preferably is in the industry. Okay, you're published. You finally got through all the technology, and you now know, all right, you have to learn a whole different industry. It's called marketing. And this, in the old days, you went through the publisher, it was mostly their responsibility to get the word out that they had a publication, because they didn't make money if they didn't get the word out, and you certainly didn't make any royalties. If you're going to self-publish, you are now the marketer, period. As an example of what you need to do, a buddy of mine retired from the Navy, and then he decided to write novels, mystery novels. So when it came time, he self-published it, and when it came time to market it, he had a list of 5,000 people that he knew that had either been stationed with him in the Navy, or was a relative, or a friend, or whatever, and he had to indulge in self-promotion. That's what it amounts to. You've got to get the word out there, and as one of my publishers, the one of Common Sense Supervision, told me, he said, you want to get as many copies out there as possible, and then it will be like concentric circles. One person will tell another person, will tell another person, will tell another person, and of course that expands out and you get to sell your books. I can assure you though, if you're self-publishing, no marketing, no sales. You can go through your publisher, like let's say that you went through KDP. Then you will have to put up a blurb that talks about your book, and then it will be put up on their website, the publisher's website. And that's nice, but you should also have it put up on your own website. Nowadays, anybody can put up a website. We talked about you getting the word out to your friends, but you also have to do the marketing and put out press releases. Every event, everything that you do should be an event. And you're welcome to invite the press. They may not show up, but you can invite them, be ready for them, understand what they need so that you are ready for it. They may need a JPEG of the cover of your book. And they may want some photos to back up stuff in your book. And then of course you have to learn to write a press release. Hi, here I am, and here's what I'm all about, and this is why. Who, what, where, when, and why is what I always go by. And then you can go to book signings. You have your book, or you can set things up where people have ordered your book and now you're doing a presentation, and they can bring their copy of the book and you will sign it. Everybody likes to have a copy of a book signed by the author. Now, that said, nobody shows up for your book signings unless you advertise it. You have to promote it. And of course, team up with the local library, team up with a local bookstore, team up with, in my case, with the Nature Books, I team up with the Nature Center. And get the word out. The speaking engagement has worked very well for me, and my books nowadays are all about getting people up and out and get them moving out in nature and exploring. And so people want to know about that. Most people don't know what's in their own backyard, and I kind of make a living by telling them what's in their own backyard. You want to have business cards. It's a simple thing, 500 of them won't cost you that much money. And you want to get those business cards into as many hands as possible. One of the tricks that I use when I do a presentation, I go, please take 2 business cards, one for you and one to give to a friend who might be interested. And of course that's how I get those concentric circles to generate. It's all up to you. If it is, I always say, if it is to be, it is up to me. And that's so true in publicity and marketing. The key to your success is knowing these industries and what to do and what mistakes to avoid. So I suggest either ordering something online or from your local library on how to get published. When I first went to find the book, How to Get Happily Published, I walked into a bookstore and they had it. And I read it, and I didn't really believe everything that I read, so I went across town and I walked into a bookstore and I said, do you have anything on how to get published? And they had half a dozen different titles there. And so I pulled another one off the shelf and I read that. And it said pretty much the same thing as the first one. But I'm sure your local library can help you find either How to Get Happily Published or some other publication. In case you need help, I'm always available. I can't type. I know a journalist who doesn't know how to write, or doesn't know how to type rather, but you can always contact me either through my webpage, at rogerfulton.com. Tough to remember, rogerfulton.com. And you can contact me by email through that page, and you can see what I've done for my marketing on that page. But you can also directly get me through email at roger@rogerfulton.com. And I'll be happy to answer. I check my email twice a day, noon and midnight. And I will try to get back to you as soon as I can with any questions you might have about, anything that you find.
Thank you very much for coming back to talk to us today, Roger.
It's my pleasure to get the word out, whether it's going outside in nature or getting someone helping to get somebody published. Glad to help.